Welcome to the third part in the series where I go back and revisit the Resident Evil games on the PlayStation 1 console. Now I've already covered 1 and 2, and as I stated in those videos, to me they are just absolute classics. Absolutely love the first two games. So now, it's about time we take a look at Resident Evil 3 Nemesis.
Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is a survival horror game for the PlayStation 1. Originally released in September of 1999, us in the PAL region would have to wait until February of 2000 to get our hands on this title though. It was published and produced by Capcom. Development for this game began straight after the completion of the previous game in the series. Produced yet again by Shinji Mikami, Hideki Kamiya would step down as director for this game to work on another project within Capcom, so they got... oh my god, I'm going to murder this. Kazuhiro Aoyama to step in as director for this one. Capcom were working on various Resident Evil projects at the time, and it was originally planned for the third game to be based around the character Hunk, retrieving and bringing back a sample of the G virus. Hunk was the leader of the Alpha team for the Umbrella Security Service, which you might remember from the previous games. Those were the guys that rushed into William Birkin's office, causing him to inject himself with the G virus rather than handing it over. Plans for this version of the game were scrapped, fearing they didn't want fans to be waiting ages for a new game in the series, especially with the release of the PlayStation 2 just right round the corner as well. After having to scrap the previous idea, the team decided to use the previous game's engine and bring back Jill Valentine, who was a member of the Special Tactics and Rescue Service and also a playable character in the first game. This game introduces Jill Valentine back into the series. This time the game is set around Jill Valentine escaping Raccoon City, which has now been reduced to complete chaos with zombies running wild on the streets. You can see just how severe the outbreak is in the intro movie. The CGI looks absolutely brilliant. It's worth noting that this game is broken up into two parts. The first part is set 24 hours before the second game, but the second part is set after Resident Evil 2. Seen as it's the same engine used from the previous game, it pretty much plays the same. Still using the D-pad to control movement, pressing down square while holding the direction will make your character run, pressing the circle button will bring up your inventory, and here's where you'll be able to view your character's current health status. They've changed how the inventory screen looks, something they've done with all Resident Evil games released up to this point, keeping each one fresh and more slick as they come. When you first open up this screen, you'll notice two files are already in your inventory. One will explain some new features they have added that will affect gameplay. A couple new features is the ability to quick turn, which helps keep the pace of the game up. Unlike the previous games, if the player wanted to turn in the opposite direction, they'd have to slowly turn 180 degrees or run in a full circle. The option to quick turn is a nice addition. As stated, they're using the same engine, so it's still tank controls, but they've managed to polish it up a bit by adding this simple mechanic into the game. Another thing you'll read in this file is the ability to dodge enemy attacks, which sounds great, but at least for me anyways, it seemed to be absolutely random when I'd pull it off. I'm sure it's something speedrunners and the like have managed to master, but even in this playthrough it seems I'd pull it off with luck. A nice new addition nonetheless though. Explodable objects and objects you can interact with your gun are also something new added into this. I don't know why it took till the third game for this to happen, but it's a great thing to see, and who doesn't like seeing a group of zombies getting blown up simultaneously? Live action quick decisions is another new feature in this game. There will be moments in the game where you are asked what your character should do next. Here's an example. When you're in the tram and need to escape, you're given the option to use the emergency brake system or jump out of the window. And of course, I chose the most dramatic option.
It's useless!
Having these live decision options makes for good replayability to see what the whole game has to offer. The other file you'll read will introduce the player to the ammo mixing tool. This will explain to the player how to mix certain gunpowders to make different types of ammunition for the guns you'll have in the game, Don't worry though, the file includes an easy to work out chart, so whatever ammo you need, just refer to this. As long as you have enough gunpowder, you should be fine. What I ended up doing was saving all my gunpowder until I managed to get the Magnum. It's explained in the file, the more player makes the same ammo type, the more the player will be able to make. See it as a leveling up system. The more you make the same ammo, the better you become at crafting, to effectively being able to make more and more each time you do so. The Magnum is a beast in this game, so I'd suggest using my method. Back to the inventory menu though. They've changed how you view the files too. Unlike the previous games where files would be stored in a coloured book corresponding to the area you found them in this they're all just laid out over 2 screens. I kind of prefer the older layout to view files, but it's no big deal really. Also, you can view the map now by pressing L2. You can still navigate to the map through the inventory screen, but I think mapping it to L2 was a nice touch and does not slow down the pace of the game either. They've kept the puzzle elements with this game too, and for me these are the toughest ones yet. Most are fairly straightforward, like in the clock tower for example. You'll come to a part where you need a cog to get the bell to ring to signal the escape chopper. It's obvious that the cog is somewhere, you just need to explore and find it, but others aren't as straightforward as that. Two most notably, one being the stone/clock puzzle and the other being the water vaccine puzzle. With the stone clock puzzle you need to place the stone in the correct clock to eventually get the correct time to display. It's not the hardest puzzle really, I think it's more of the fact that if you get one wrong you've got to examine it again, have the text scroll to say you want to pick it up, etc. Just a ball ache really. The water vaccine puzzle though is nippy, and the most annoying part is that it's right in front of your eyes. You've got to line up the 3 strips correctly to correspond with the strip at the top. The answer is right in front of you. You just need to tweak the lines and moving them left and right to line them up correctly. They also added the ability to freely go up and down staircases. Unlike the previous games where you get to a set of stairs and have to press the action button, not in this one though. You can walk towards a set of stairs and just go up and down freely, keeping the game free flowing. A small touch, but a much welcome feature I must say. The graphics are fantastic for this game. Even though they use the same engine from the previous game, it somehow feels like they pushed the graphics and visuals even more. Everything just looks a lot more detailed, and the CGI cutscenes look absolutely crisp too. It really does represent that classic PS1 era where you'd think the graphics were never going to get any better than this. How wrong were we though? I know I mentioned in the last video that I loved the outdoor parts and seeing the carnage on the streets of Raccoon City, so if you like those parts too, you're in for a treat with this one. The majority of the game is played outside, whether it be on the streets or in the graveyards. Yeah, there are parts played inside, but it's the outside sections that strike me the most with how highly detailed it all looks. The streets in this feel like a real place, with bars to explore, petrol stations, hospitals, and you actually visit the Raccoon City Police Department from the previous game, which is a nice touch giving players a familiar environment, but with a little twist keeping the experience fresh all round. At this point in the series, having a great soundtrack is a given, but I'm weird with this one if I'm honest. I see it as one long track rather than individual tracks, if that makes any kind of sense. It seems that the score complements each thing corresponding to what's happening on screen in the game. For me it's definitely the most unsettling, almost claustrophobic feeling at times. That said though, there's definitely a few bits of music that stick out. Hearing the theme for the police station from the second game again is always welcomed well from me. And of course, they have made a new save room theme, which is the norm at this point. That's one thing I love about Resident Evil, is that even if it's your first time hearing it, and if the storage box and typewriter to save doesn't give it away, you just know you're in a save room. The music overall complements the game perfectly, but the in-game noises are brilliant too, from the gunfire sounds from a Magnum and blowing a zombie's head off. Also, the sound of wind with zombies howling in the distance on the streets of Raccoon City. It's just the perfect package for me when it comes to survival horror games. Enemies are in full effect in this game. We see the return of zombies, which I think by this point goes without saying. The crows make a return too, easy to avoid by just running past them though. Dogs as well, but I think they've lost the touch in this one with them. In the previous video I stated the dogs in the second game compared to the first game appeared to be a lot more aggressive. I don't feel they are much to worry about in this one, and you'll be lucky if they even notice you half the time. Hunters make a return too in the hospital section of the game. Love their reintroduction back into the series. Spiders are here too, but don't seem to be in this as much as the previous games. Only a couple of times you'll be in the same area as them. You'll also have a mini boss fight with a giant worm on 2 occasions. The first encounter with it you can pass completely without even firing your weapon, but with the second encounter with it you have no choice but to stand your ground and kill it to continue on with the story. It's been a good few years since I last completed this game, and I don't know if it was because I was playing the game on the hardest difficulty, but this worm is an absolute bullet sponge. Just pray to God you have health items, and a good gun like the grenade launcher or magnum with plenty ammo to finish him off. Brainsuckers and Drain Demois make their introduction into the series. They both remind me of them chimeras from the first game if you remember them. Fast and just freaky looking. I avoid them both at all costs. They sort of look like how I'd imagine a human/spider hybrid looking thing to be like. Enough for me to just keep on running. But the most memorable enemy in this, and also which the game's half named after, and that is Nemesis. He's a new breed of tyrant deployed into Raccoon City to kill the remaining STARS members, Jill and Brad Vickers, who was the pilot in the first game. Remember him?
No! Don't go!
If he was shit scared then of a couple of zombie dogs, how do you think he's going to handle Nemesis? Not very well. Here's Nemesis' introduction to the game.
Jill!
Brad!
We've gotta... Jill! Help!
No!
Much like Mr. X in the previous game, Nemesis will play a massive part in the game, but more so than Mr. X. Mr. X would give you jump scares appearing at random times, but Nemesis will actually follow you in this game. Nothing more scary when I first played this back in the day and hearing a door slam behind you and him going STARS and begin running and chasing you down. With your first encounter with Nemesis, you have the choice to stay and fight, but it's not worth it most of the time, because he'll kick your arse. Now I don't know if it's because I'm playing this playthrough on hard, but I remember playing it on easy when I was younger and killing him every time I'd get the chance to, but when I first seen him on this playthrough, I got my arse handed to me a couple of times until I finally decided to run into the police station through the QuickTime live decision option. But even when you go inside the police station, he's still persistent on getting you. Later on in the playthrough, once I had more guns and plenty ammo, I'd take him on every time. It can be worth the hassle killing him though. I know if you're playing it on hard and you kill him, he'll drop gun parts to make special weapons, so I suppose it's worth it. I'd watch out though if you're with another character in the game. They can mess up your run for you by being killed, so in these instances, there's 2 of you to worry about instead of just yourself. This was the first time I realised this. I had a fight with Nemesis while with Carlos, and Nemesis took him out the game completely, which resulted in a game over, so it's something to bear in mind. But yeah, back to Nemesis. He's absolutely relentless. Look how intense this section was. I've got 2 gems that need to be placed here to open up the next section of the map, but he's right there the whole time. I'm not going to lie, I was absolutely sweating during this bit. A lot of the quick decisions you'll have to make revolve around Nemesis when you cross paths, usually giving you the option to stay and fight, but there may be other options for you to either maybe electrocute him or throw him off a bridge, etc, depending on your surroundings and location really. You'll see several forms of Nemesis throughout your playthrough, but I'll touch on that a bit more later. Along with the enemies you encounter, you'll also come into contact with people too. Unlike the previous game where there was a large selection of characters you meet, in this one though there's not as many. In fact, only 2 key characters, not including Nemesis, The two main characters you meet are a part of the same military service owned by Umbrella, Biohazard Countermeasure Service. Both Carlos and Nikolai play big roles in this game, but we'll talk about them in more detail when we go over the story. Let's dive into the story. Now, I'm only going to be covering important parts of the story and bits that are relevant and drawing the player into what it has to offer. And I should also mention your game might play out differently to how mine's did on this run, but as far as I'm aware, all have the same outcome, so let's get into it.
Resident Evil.
The game opens with Jill explaining the state in which Raccoon City is currently in after Umbrella taking over and how she needs to escape the city. You're presented with some brilliant CGI cutscenes with the police and military trying to calm the streets and get rid of the zombies. These cutscenes for me sum up the PlayStation 1 perfectly. Pure brilliance. Anyway, Jill eventually finds a bar while searching the streets of Raccoon City where she finds her old comrade, Brad Vickers from the first game, and he explains how bad the outbreak has gotten and also that something is out there to get them and it's after STARS members, building up the reveal for when you see Nemesis, of course. Once Jill finally reaches the main entrance to Raccoon City Police Department, this is where you'll first see the Nemesis, and he disposes Brad in an absolute brutal way. The player is given a choice whether to stay or fight. Once inside the police station and inside the STARS office, you hear a distress call coming over the radio from a man called Carlos who's asking for backup support, and also saying he's lost contact with the rest of his platoon. When inside a diner you come across in the city, this is where you'll meet Carlos, the man you heard over the radio in the police station. He explains who he is and that he's a part of Umbrella, which Jill, as you'd imagine, would be shocked by this. Although your meeting would be cut short because Nemesis will come in and find yous. You're given an option once again to either stay and fight with Nemesis or hide and lob a grenade. I tried taking him out, but Carlos was a liability and kept getting killed, so I eventually went for the easier option of just hiding and lobbing a grenade at Nemesis. You get a nice gun upgrade for doing so. Once he's been dealt with and you both leave the diner, Carlos explains he's been sent to save the civilians of Raccoon City, but Jill doesn't seem to be buying it. You'll eventually come to a broken down tram, and inside you'll find Carlos's teammate Nikolai and another one of their fallen teammates who seems to be in a very bad way. He's just rambling absolute nonsense. I think he's had the shit kicked out of him that bad he has no idea what is going on. Check it out.
Oh, this looks bad.
They're coming. Get ready. Fire. Fire. Stay together.
Calm down.
Once Jill moves into the next carriage, she's greeted by Carlos and Nikolai. Carlos explains they are the only survivors and they should stick together, but Nikolai doesn't trust Jill. After some persuasion by Carlos, Nikolai gives in and runs down what the plan is: to get the tram up and running again, and to get to the clock tower where there's a designated extraction zone for a chopper to come and save them. So Jill is then sent on her way to collect parts to get the tram up and running again so they can escape to the clock tower. You'll soon come to some sort of office where you'll hear gunshots first, then bump into Nikolai where he's just put to rest one of his comrades who have been infected. Something just ain't right about this guy. After being in the back room and taking care of an ambush from zombies, you hear gunfire coming from the other room and what sounds like Nikolai screaming. Once you have finally retrieved all the parts for the tram and meeting back up with Carlos, Jill explains Nikolai won't be joining, only thinking the worst from what she heard in that building. You begin your escape, but did you really think it would be that easy to get away? Once Carlos takes control of the tram, you make your way, but they both feel the tram shake and hear Mikhail scream from the other coach. This gets both Carlos and Jill's attention. Jill goes to investigate and is greeted by the Nemesis in the coach with Mikhail. He tells Jill to go back into the other coach and begins to fire a load of rounds into the Nemesis. A brilliant cutscene plays out with Nemesis throwing him around, but Mikhail has a little trick up his sleeve: a grenade. What an absolute lad, sacrificing himself for his teammates. You're then given the option to either jump out the window or slam the emergency brake, and as covered before, I obviously jumped out the window. The tram derails and smashes into a building, just so happens to be the clock tower building where you were originally trying to get to anyways. How convenient, eh? Once in the clock tower and you ring the bell to signal the evacuation chopper, a cutscene plays out with the chopper arriving and Jill trying to get its attention, soon to be ruined though by Nemesis shooting it down with his grenade launcher. Now up to this point, you've always been given the option to stay and fight with the Nemesis or run, but this time there's no option, so you better hope you're tooled up properly for this battle. Nemesis poisons Jill and then the battle begins. Once taken care of Nemesis, he backs off into the fire, then Jill collapses. Very, very dramatic. Out comes Carlos with an over-the-top roll from the fire. Fearing for the worst, he takes her to a chapel inside the building so she can rest. Now remember at the start of the video where I said this game played into 2 bits? Everything you'd done up until this point took place before the events of Resident Evil 2. The whole time Jill was poisoned and out cold, that's when everything you've seen in Resident Evil 2 happened. When she wakes up, Resident Evil 2 and the events that took place in that game has already happened. Now back to the chapel. Jill has been infected with the virus and tells Carlos she can't feel anything and wants Carlos's word that if she turns into a zombie, she wants Carlos to kill her. Pretty deep stuff. Now the player takes control of Carlos on the hunt to get medicine for Jill, which brings us to the hospital in Raccoon City and also where the hunters will be reintroduced once again into the series. You'll bump into Nikolai once again after originally thinking he's dead, and guess what? He tried to kill another one of his teammates, but instead without realising he didn't do the job properly, his teammate lets off a grenade, blowing Nikolai right out of the window. Upon leaving the hospital, Carlos notices a bomb has been planted. I wonder who left that there. Carlos proceeds to escape quickly. Once back in the clock tower, Carlos has a run-in with Nemesis, who now looks completely different from the last time you've seen him in the battle. He quickly does a runner to wake up Jill with a medicine and proceeds to tell Jill that Nemesis is still out there and also that Nikolai is still alive, and only now realises he's definitely in on it all and is an enemy who cannot be trusted. By this point though, I'm sure the player guessed that. Now that you're in control of Jill once again, you'll come to a cabin where you'll unfortunately have another run-in with Nikolai. He explains he had no intention of helping Jill or Carlos and had been sent to get detailed analysis on the zombies and collect live data on the species lurking around Raccoon City. Now that he's gone, Jill makes her way to the Dead Factory. Not without another encounter with Nemesis though, this time on a bridge. You're given the options to jump off yourself or push him off. See you later mate. Once in the Dead Factory, you see Carlos who has some worrying news. He tells Jill they are planning on launching a missile right into Raccoon City, wiping out everything dead or alive, and that they need to escape. Jill eventually has another run-in with Nikolai, but this time he's trying to kill her by shooting at her. He tells her that he's planning to escape himself and wipe out all other survivors and stealing their data, in which they have found, and explains his payout will be bigger if he's the only survivor. He also spills the beans that there is a bounty on Jill's head which he wants to claim, but he doesn't stay around for too long. Jill enters the next room where Nikolai had been killed and an evacuation sequence plays out, which we all know by this point in the Resident Evil series that some shit is about to go down. The room's black, but you hear Nemesis say in his now iconic line, "Stars," and a true battle begins. Now this battle is a bit of a bastard. Like I said previously, I don't know if it was because it was on hard or not, or the fact that in the cutscene leading up to the fight it clearly shows his weak point, but by doing it this way it also brings out a game mechanic's weak point, and that is the auto aiming at objects. See, it's clear from the cutscene, whenever Nemesis goes near one of these acid chamber looking things, you've got to shoot it, but the auto-aim decides itself if it wants to work or not. A bit of a pain in the arse, but you'll get there eventually. I suggest if you have the Magnum and a load of bullets, you'll be fine in this one. Once dealt with, it's time to escape for good. While escaping, you'll get to a room where you'll hear Carlos over the radio saying he's managed to sort out a reliable escape with a chopper, and you'll come to a room with a computer and a massive cannon of some kind. This is where you'll have your last battle with Nemesis. If you actually take a minute to look around, you'll see a nice few nods to the 2 previous games. You'll see a massive tyrant laid out in the wall, and if you look on the floor you'll see what looks like Mr. X from the previous game. Love this kind of stuff in games. Anyways, back to the final battle with Nemesis. A barely recognisable one at that now. You just need to push these batteries in place and line Nemesis up in the perfect spot and then BOOM! He's toast. Or is he? When leaving out the door, you'll see his remains crawl to you, and this has to be one of the most badass moments in Resident Evil history for me. You're given the option to completely finish him off or evacuate as planned. Don't run. Finish him off and you'll get this classic line from Jill.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.
Jill finally makes her escape and jumps into the chopper with Carlos, just in time before Raccoon City gets wiped out completely.
I guess we're all set.
Alright then, we're out of here.
Oh no.
It's here. It's time to go.
That's it. I've had it. This time they've been too fun.
Now I must say I'm not the greatest at explaining stories, so I really urge you to give this game a go for yourself if you haven't already. It really is a classic, and if you have played it before, definitely give it another bash. It really is a brilliant entry in the series, and for me you just cannot beat the classic Resident Evil games on the PlayStation 1 console. After completing the game, you're told how well you've done, giving you your time of completion and a score. You'll also unlock the boutique key where on your next playthrough you can go and change your outfit. A couple of nice nods to other Capcom games here. You can unlock Regina's outfit, who is a playable character in the Dino Crisis series. A few others too, but also the outfit Jill Valentine wore in the first game. I've never been bothered myself about alternative outfits in games, but it's a nice touch for those that like this sort of customization, I guess. You'll also unlock the Mercenaries mini game mode. In this you choose a character who you want to play as. Some have better guns than others, so it's really up to you. You pretty much have to get from A to B within a certain time, but don't worry, getting kills etc adds more time onto the clock. You'll be granted with points at the end which you use to buy guns that you can carry over into the story mode. I've never been that bothered about this kind of stuff, but it's a nice little added bonus. You can also unlock epilogue files each time you complete the game. These are files which tell you what the characters got up to after these events took place. There are 8 in total to unlock, which means you have to complete the game 8 times. I love this game, but I haven't got the time for that, sadly. They're not that amazing either, to be honest, just a little bonus to keep players playing the game. Resident Evil 3 was received well by players and critics alike, scoring high marks all across the board, which really I can't argue with. It is an absolute classic and one I look back on fondly from my childhood. There would also be ports of the game for the Dreamcast and Windows PC in 2000, and then in 2003 would see a release for the Nintendo GameCube. But I would suggest if you haven't played this classic before, give it a bash on the PlayStation 1. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. In the time of recording and making this video, rumours are flying higher than ever for a Resident Evil 3 remake, which I'd welcome with open arms. I mean, it makes sense, seeing as they've done a remake of the first 2 games in the series and how well in particular the remake of 2 done this year. Keep that hype train rolling, Capcom, please. But then this happened in the middle of making this video.
Jill, over here!
What the hell? How could this many people be infected?
This city is completely cut off, isolated.
Don't look at me like that, alright? I'm not infected.
But right now it's got a hard-on for the only 2 stars left in town.
They don't need a bleeding heart like you getting in the way.
Star's office has to be in this direction.
Gets worse every night.
They don't want the world to know what they've done.
Oh, my head.
What's wrong with Umbrella?
I can't stop them all!
You gotta get out of there!
You guys are the ones who caused all of this!
No, wait!
Oh, come on.
We've gotta be dreaming.
Holy shit, how amazing does that look? I honestly cannot wait for this to come out. And by the way, the trailer just dropped out of nowhere. I was just flicking through Facebook and boom, it came up on the Resident Evil page that I'm following on there. And that was just a little bit of the trailer I showed you. Honestly, if you haven't seen it already, I would totally encourage you to go and look at the whole thing. Like, I cannot wait. I'd already recorded all the on-screen stuff, was in the middle of putting the video together, and had to stop and redo all this on-screen video stuff just because of the trailer came out. And it's totally worth it. I'm so happy that I'm able to put this into the video. But yeah, the remake of the first game on the GameCube was fantastic. The remake of Resident Evil 2 was absolutely amazing also. So yes, the third one, cannot wait, bring it on next year at some point. Yes!
This game would even eventually be put into the cinemas as a full-length feature film, but the less said about the Resident Evil films, the better. At the time of release in 2004 I was amazed, but when I watched it back again a couple of years ago I couldn't help but cringe. Although I will say this about the film, the comedian Mike Epps plays a pimp in it, and I can honestly say I got a good laugh from that. Not sure if it's meant to be funny, but it's Mike Epps, so of course you're gonna laugh. The man's a legend.
So I guess that wraps up the video then. Resident Evil 3, absolutely fantastic game, and what a way to finish off the Resident Evil games on the PlayStation 1. I mean, it really is just the perfect trilogy for me when it comes to survival horror and just that PlayStation 1 era in general. Like, all the Resident Evil games on the PlayStation 1 are absolutely brilliant.
Where am I? Oh! I don't remember anything. Who am I?
What the hell was that? Oh shit. I guess I'll see you in the next one then. Shit.